Hello, my name is Nick, and welcome to our video on loops in Python. This video is part of our Introduction to Python series. To make the content in this video more accessible, click the Close Captions button or adjust the playback speed. In this video, we will learn about how to use loops in Python, which will span the following topics: why we use loops in Python and how to use them, the two different types of loops, for loops and while loops, and how to use loops with lists in Python. Let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about a fundamental concept for programming and Python: loops. Loops are used when we want to repeat a certain set of actions multiple times within our program. Sometimes we know beforehand how many times we'd like to repeat an action within our program, and other times we won't know beforehand. And we have two different loops for both of these scenarios: for loops and while loops. For example, if I wanted to print out the message hello 5 times, normally I would have to do something like this. I would have to print out our hello message, and I would have to do it 5 separate times if I wanted to see it 5 times. And so let's just go ahead and copy the rest of those in there. And if I run this program, we would expect that we would see 5 different hello messages. But I have to keep on repeating myself, and if I wanted to write more than this, I would have to keep on writing more print statements. But another way I could do this, since this is an action that we're repeating over and over, this print statement, we could instead use just a for loop. We would write it as for, and we need a variable to keep track of which number time through this for loop we're on, followed by the in keyword. And then one way we can just give it a number is using the range function. And so we'll use range, and in this case we want to write it 5 times. So we'll give it the number 5, followed by a colon, just like an if or anything else. And inside, now that we're indented in this for loop, we'll write our print statement just like before, but we're only going to print it once. And now the for loop is going to say, okay, I'm going to execute whatever code I have below me 5 times. And so now let's delete these hellos from above and just keep our for loop. And now when we run this program, we can see we still get 5 hello messages, but I only had to print hello once. And the for loop is the one that's saying I'm going to go through and do this 5 different times. And here is where the powerful part comes in, is I could switch this to another number, for example, and without having to change any other code, automatically I now get 9 hello messages instead of 5, just by changing this number here. And so that's why for loops can be really powerful. And in this case, we know beforehand how many times we want to iterate, how many times we want to execute what's in our for loop. And so we use a for loop. Another example of knowing how many iterations we should use up front is when we have a list of items. Since Python can check how many items are in a list, we can define a for loop very similarly and iterate through each item in the list. So first, let's create ourselves a list, and we'll create just a list of names. And now, if I wanted to print out each of those names, for example, similar to before, I could do print, and then I would have to access each item in that names list. So there, let's comment out these hello messages. And if we run this program now, we can see that it's going to access the first name and print that. Then it's going to access the second name and print that. And then it accesses the third name and prints that. But now imagine if we had 100 names in this list or 1,000,000 names. It would just not be feasible to go about doing this, printing out every single name by accessing each one at a time. So what we could do instead is use a for loop. Just like before, we'll use the for keyword. And now instead of just the letter I, we'll give it a more meaningful name here because we want to keep track of each item in our list. Our list is a list of names. So for each one, let's give it the temporary variable name, followed by the in keyword, and then the list we want to iterate through, which is our names list up above on line 5, followed by the colon. And now we'll still do our print statement, but now I'll use that temporary variable, and I only have to keep this here once. The for loop is going to know I have 3 items to iterate through. So I'm going to execute this print statement 3 times. And each time through, that name variable is going to be equal to whatever item we're currently on. So the first time through, that name variable is going to be equal to Nick. The second time through, it'll be equal to Jason, and third time be equal to Camille. And again, if I run this same program now with only a single print statement, but within our for loop, now we can see we still get all 3 names added. And if I were to add a 4th name here, our program does not have to change, and immediately that 4th name is automatically added because it's part of our list. And the for loop is iterating through each item in the list. Lastly, there are other scenarios where we don't know upfront how many iterations we need to use for our program, such as when we need to accept the user's input to determine if they want to continue or not. If they chose Y to continue, we should loop again through our program. Otherwise, we should exit our program. But since we don't know how many times a user might want to continue beforehand, this is an example of where we would use a while loop. A while loop is similar to an if statement, which accepts a conditional statement, a true or false statement, but the difference is that a while loop will continue executing the code within the while loop as long as that conditional statement is true, unlike an if statement, which will only execute once and then continue with the rest of the program. We also need to make sure that the conditional statement eventually evaluates to false so that we break out of the while loop. Otherwise, we'll have what's known as an infinite loop and our program will never end. Here's an example of a while loop. We could say, let's keep a variable to keep track of the user's input, and we'll say it's equal to y initially. And now we'll create our while loop that says, while that user input is equal to y, then as long as that statement is true, we're going to continue executing what's in the while loop. And so we'll say print I'm still in the while loop. And if I was to run this program now, notice what would happen. It keeps on printing forever and ever and ever because it prints this statement and then comes back up to the while loop to see, is this statement still true? Yes, it is. So I'm going to print this message. And then it checks it again. Is this still true? Yes, it is. And it'll always be true because we're never updating this user input to anything else within our while loop. So we have no way to break out of the while loop. Here, let's add another statement after we print the message that says, let's get the user's input and say, input, do you want to continue? Y or N? And now, when we run this program, let's see how it differs. Now it prints our statement once and asks us, do I want to continue, yes or no? Here I'll say yes. And now because that was true, we come back up to line 13 and the user input was still equal to yes. So we print the message again, and it asks us again, do we want to continue? I'll say yes again, and it prints the message again. And now this time when I say no, now the program finally exits. Because when I set it to no, our user input is equal to n now. And when we come up to line 13, that conditional statement is no longer true. So it skips 14 and 15 and continues with the rest of the program, which is nothing, so the program ends. These are the two main loops in Python and the various situations in which you'd want to use them. For more academic support resources, please read the video's description. Thank you for watching, and we hope to work with you soon.